So we're heading into a big week. It's a big week for obviously the U.S. Big week for me personally, but we might as well introduce the whole issue of the Supreme Court pick, which I haven't discussed that much at length until now because it's not as if I'm a huge judicial expert. I did talk a little with Alex Edenidis about a week ago about that, and I would say that for me, I think I've made up my mind who should be the nominee, but let's read through it anyway. What you need to know about Trump's top SCOTUS contenders. President Trump has narrowed his short list of possible picks to replace retiring Justice Anthony Kennedy and whoever he ultimately chooses Monday night. It will be a relatively young and conservative nominee. The president's top contenders, Amy Coney Barrett, Brett Kavanaugh, and Raymond Kethledge, have distinct records and focuses from which Trump should be foci, but I guess they're not real Latin experts, from which Mr. Trump can weigh his decision. Barrett has the least experience on the bench and has emphasized social issues. Kavanaugh has extensive experience working in D.C. courts and its political scene, and Kethledge has built his conservative judicial credentials in federal court in Michigan, removed from Washington's politics. Mr. Trump could still pick a wild card from the original list of 25 contenders his administration released last year. He is expected to make that announcement Monday at 9 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time from the White House. Here's what you need to know about the top contenders so far. So there's Amy Coney Barrett. At 46, Barrett is the youngest of the president's top picks. And hint, an advantage for conservatives who want a Trump appointee to serve as long as possible in the land's highest court. If selected and confirmed, Barrett would be the only conservative female justice. The current female justices in the court have been nominated by Democratic presidents and are considered liberal. Potentially working against Barrett is her relatively short tenure in federal court. The Notre Dame Law School graduate has only served on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Seventh Circuit since fall 2017. Because she has served on the bench for such a short period of time, she has few opinions to dissect that could offer insight into her judicial philosophy and predict potential future positions. Before serving on the Seventh Court, Barrett, a mother of seven, was a professor at Notre Dame Law School. Barrett, a Catholic, is considered reliably socially conservative, and conservatives consider her as someone who will faithfully uphold principles of religious liberty from the bench. Her faith came under discussion during last year's nomination hearing process when Senator Dianne Feinstein, a Democrat of California, said, "You have a long history of believing that your religious beliefs should prevail, and the dogma lives loudly within you. The power of Christ compels you." I can't believe she said that to a person because she's Catholic. I'm not Catholic, by the way. Given the speed bumps in the process related to, I'm not Christian either, so if you're asking, oh, are you some other, no. Given the speed bumps in the process related to religion during last year's confirmation process and her lack of experience on the bench, some conservatives fear her confirmation process this time around could be a challenging one. And then there's Brett Kavanaugh, who is 53 but has extensive experience on the bench. The Yale Law School, so this is a guy I don't want on the bench. The Yale Law School graduate has served as a judge in the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit since 2006. So he was appointed there by Bush. Through the years, he has issued scores of opinions, dissents, and concurrences. He clerked for Kennedy, the man he would be replacing, and he gained attention from his time working for former independent counsel Ken Starr during the investigation into then-President Bill Clinton. I think that's a strike against him because that was a failed investigation. So, again, so that's two strikes. One of them is he went to Yale Law School and he was appointed by Bush. That seems like a patronage pick. So if Trump was to nominate this guy, I would probably say I'm against it. Although, to be honest with you, it was probably still passed because I'll explain. He is the only one of the top three with a law degree from an Ivy League school. Wow. Kavanaugh has a track, wow that there was only one, has a track record of siding with the religious organizations over governments and other groups that challenge them, a particularly attractive trait to conservatives. In Priests for Life versus Health and Human Services, Kavanaugh declared the Obamacare contraceptive mandate violated constitutional rights to religious liberty. On the issue of abortion, key for many conservatives, Kavanaugh dissented from a recent ruling requiring an undocumented immigrant minor who wanted an abortion to be granted access to one. So a woman who was an undocumented immigrant minor wanted an abortion, and we had to give it to her. Well, it could be, and this is where I might disagree with him. It could be that she was a rape victim. So if she was a rape victim and she wanted access to an abortion, I don't think I would oppose it. And that's one of the few areas where I think I dissent from some conservatives. The D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals overturned the decision by a 3-judge panel of the same court that included Kavanaugh. It's unclear, however, how much of an emphasis the president will place on abortion rights issues. Last week, Mr. Trump said he probably wouldn't bring up Roe versus Wade with candidates. So he might say, "Well, I didn't care. I don't give a fuck about Roe versus Wade. That's not even something I care about." Given that Kavanaugh's jurisdiction entails D.C., he's heard a number of cases related to agencies and administrative law, typically siding against agencies that create significant policy through regulation. So that's on the plus side. Kavanaugh has also sided with conservatives on the issue of net neutrality, dissenting when the court upheld Obama-era net neutrality regulations. Regulations requiring internet service providers to treat websites equally. Kavanaugh argued that the regulations circumvented Congress's role. The FCC repealed net neutrality in December. Kavanaugh has also generally sided against the Environmental Protection Agency in cases over its authority to regulate, a boon for an administration that has worked to loosen or eliminate environmental regulations viewed as too burdensome. In 2016, and I think at a certain point you have to ask, do we have to undo everything the EPA is doing? Because if that's the truth, I think that at a certain point we have to wonder, does protect the environment? If conservatives are so dead set against the EPA, they should propose an alternative. I think, for example, and by the way, saying that the states should be responsible for environmental protection, I don't think is necessarily the best idea. There's certain states like Arkansas or Michigan that have a horrible track record for keeping their environment safe. For keeping it safe both for wildlife and for humans. In 2016, Kavanaugh authored the majority opinion in PHH Corporation versus Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, finding the basic structure of the Consumer Authority to be unconstitutional. The Trump administration has sought to lessen the CFPB's authority and decrease its budget. So then you have Raymond Kethledge, he's a graduate of the University of Michigan Law School, as a judge on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 6th Circuit in Michigan. Like Kavanaugh, he's 51 years old. Kethledge clerked for Kennedy. So again, another person who is thought to be of the style of Anthony Kennedy. As Mr. Trump often touts the need to protect the Second Amendment, Kethledge is known for his defense of that amendment. In 2016, in Tyler versus Hillsdale County Sheriff's Department, for instance, Kethledge joined a concurring opinion holding that a federal statute permanently prohibiting a person who had been involuntarily committed nearly 3 decades before from owning a gun was unconstitutional. Kethledge's job has given him an opportunity to issue opinions on a number of immigration cases, in a time when Mr. Trump's approach to immigration could very well land more cases in the highest court in the land. So that might just be a strategic advantage. So it looks like this happened this must have been like a photo of his from way, way long ago, because he's 51 years old and it looks like he's in his 30s or 40s here. Kethledge is given an opportunity to issue opinion. Okay, so Kethledge has been described as an originalist and a textualist, someone who will stick with the original believed intent of the Constitution and for laws as written, but asked about his views on the Constitution and how he would describe himself during a Senate confirmation hearing in 2008, Kethledge says he doesn't really have a label. I don't really have a label that I can put on myself, Kethledge said at the time. This guy's smart, could be a politician. What I would say is that obviously, first and foremost, I'd follow Supreme Court precedent. The other thing I would say is that, again, I would make sure that the values that I would be enforcing if I were a judge are not just my values. I'm not striking something down simply because I don't like it. That is a counter-majoritarian aspect of our system of government. I would start with the text. So that's a clear attack on the active theory aspect of this. So let's see here. Still have bad speed. Here we go. The health is better now. You guys like that? So I'd like to say that I think Barrett would without a doubt be the best pick because she's on the 7th Circuit. Let me see. I think the 7th Circuit is in the southwest east or something. So what's the geographical area of that? I might be wrong. I mean, nobody can ever figure out anything about these circuits anyway. So there's I know the 9th Circuit is out west, and then there's let me see here. So it's in Illinois and Wisconsin. So I think that would be a much better area to take people from than necessarily, from Washington, D.C., where Kavanaugh is from. That would be a much better place. Somebody who's dealing a little more with aspects of, I think, the real America. Yeah, this is not going very well. So you have Illinois, Indiana, and Wisconsin. Those are the circuits that are there. The circuit justice is Elena Kagan. And then, so you put these people on the federal court. And Coney Barrett is in South Bend, Indiana. And she was appointed by Trump. And you actually have a fair amount of people appointed under Trump. You have the guy from Milwaukee, Chicago, and the guy in, two people in Chicago, if you really think about it. Who's this one? Amy J. St. Eve. So it doesn't say much about her. In any case, what I'd like to say about this is that Barrett would probably be the best choice politically. Because, first of all, she is the youngest. She's also already been through the whole fire with Dianne Feinstein and questioning her Catholicism or whatever. So a lot of people will probably look at this whole decision and say, if you guys are going to run her through the gauntlet of being, a Catholic, then she could probably respond by asking, well, you didn't ask the same questions when these other justices were on the court. I mean, Scalia, for one, was a huge Catholic. I think that if you look at Kagan and Ginsburg, they're Jewish. There's also Sotomayor, I believe, would probably not have passed the bench if she would have been more forthright about her belief system, which is largely, Sotomayor talked very openly about the fact that she's an activist judge. So essentially, we're talking about a crucial decision that I don't think Trump can take the risk of. Well, look at it this way. Kavanaugh and Kethledge might be looked at as safe picks from one standpoint, in that Kavanaugh has a long judicial record and probably will be able to worm his way through the committee hearings and impress the audience, if not necessarily the senators that are questioning him. That it would probably be very difficult for the senators to nail him down on a specific question. But then again, he was never confirmed by this Congress. He was confirmed by Congress under George Bush. So it's been a long time since he's been grilled. The same thing with Kethledge. Whereas Barrett was just grilled last year. And if she was to respond in a certain way, like, first of all, let's say that she gets on the Judiciary Committee and you see some of these senators that are asking questions that are from supposedly red states. I think that Joe Donnelly, for example, who's from Indiana who is a Democrat, will be on that panel. And Indiana, if you start questioning somebody because they're Catholic, or you don't approve them, or you don't really stand up for those people, that's a real problem. Over there in Indiana, there's a massive Catholic population in areas like South Bend. Okay, people will get really pissed off if they discover, oh, this Notre Dame judge from our state, who, she's always been like basically a big representative of our school. Now she has a chance on being in the Supreme Court, and our own home state senator is going to go against her. He already has an uphill battle to fight for in Indiana. The same would probably be true of other states where there is a bit of I would say a religious element, where there's a Democratic senator. Certain red states, Montana. I don't know if John Tester is on the committee. I'm pretty sure that Donnelly from Indiana is. Joe Manchin from West Virginia. So a lot of people who are expecting a Democratic iron wall against this, they have to understand, if the Democrats shoot down this nomination before November, they just say, well, we're going to reject her, and then they lose they lose the Senate election in November, and the Republicans gain seats. Then Trump will probably just renominate Coney Barrett and get her anyway. And then you just wait for the next Supreme Court vacancy, which will probably be either Stephen Breyer or Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And then the Democrats really have to deal with, one of these other wackos could be the nominee. This Kethledge guy, I don't think I've heard that much about, but Kavanaugh kind of looks to me like somebody I'd probably, if it was my personal choice, I'd go with somebody else besides him. But we're not talking about my personal choice. We're talking about what Donald Trump would pick, and I think to me, I could be wrong. I think he will choose Amy Coney Barrett, and it would another unsightly issue would be the Democrats basically trying to filibuster a female judicial nominee to the Supreme Court. It would also be unsightly for the rest of the Republic. Like, if there's never Trumpers in the Republican Party, they're trying to filibuster the nominee and say, well, we don't want this, like Jeff Flake saying, oh, we're trying to maintain the decorum of the country, and Trump is basically too dangerous. We can't give him another nominee until the election or whatever. Well, people are going to react to that and say Jeff Flake, a member of the Republican Party, basically stole a Supreme Court pick, tried to steal a Supreme Court pick from a woman. And he's supposedly a Republican. He's not going to. First of all, Jeff Flake is already considered basically diarrhea to both Republicans and Democrats. So that's not going to gain any more votes. This is where you really get into the strategy of this whole nonsense that's going on. Who is he going to nominate, and why would they have an advantage or not? And I really don't see an advantage of the other two over Coney Barrett, because essentially she doesn't have any real black marks on her record, because she was just confirmed about a year and a half ago, and she's already been baptized. She's received her baptism of fire, if you'll pardon the pun, from her previous hearing with Dianne Feinstein. If Feinstein was to criticize her religion again in the Judiciary Committee, criticize her Catholicism again, if Sanders, by the way, also did it, I remember that, that would be a major, major, major black mark against them, and they would be blamed for her passing through with flying colors, because some of these red state Democrat senators, Donnelly, Heitkamp, Manchin, maybe even McCaskill, who's really struggling herself. You could talk about a number of, I don't know about Debbie Stabenow in Michigan, but a lot of these red state Democrats are going to have a real problem trying to explain why they opposed the Supreme Court pick when she was basically hounded because of her, because she's a Catholic, right? The Democratic Party that for decades was, the party of Kennedy, who, the big thing was that he was the first Catholic president. Right now, you don't want a Catholic on the Supreme Court. Well, we've had people on the Supreme Court that are Catholics. Anthony Kennedy was on the Supreme Court. He was a Roman Catholic. Antonin Scalia was on the Supreme Court. He was a Roman Catholic. And for people to start objecting to that shows that they don't have any arguments left. It's basically a measure of how can I frame this in such a way that I am going to try to make it harder for the Trump administration. And if Barrett starts to look like somebody who's part of this whole, public relations campaign against Trump, then people will start to realize that the judicial nomination process has become absolutely, totally politicized. It doesn't even have the pretense of being professional like it used to. Let's not deceive ourselves and say that it was not political back then. But this will be a major, major problem for people who, that they might be religious moderates. They'll look at this if they start making major issues of Coney Barrett's religion or these other guys. I don't think that the other guys are that impressive myself, but I think that might be the key, that they're basically like people that he can throw up there, and they won't be that easy for the Democrats to pin down. They could be pretty sharp guys. Kavanaugh and Cathledge. let's say he throws in Kavanaugh. He says, "Oh, I want this Kavanaugh guy," and then the Democrats vote against him and basically reject him for whatever reason, and then they still lose the Senate because there's only a certain amount of people that will pay attention to the Supreme Court. If he nominates one of these other two judges, it's not going to be as much of a circus as if it is with Coney Barrett, because they're very nondescript, unassuming people that then you'll throw out the whole white male thing that, oh, he's I would point